Not necessarily everything, but I really value the amount of effort that's gone into creating open natural space. I commented when we talked about this before, I had preferred to see it a little bit more consolidated. But I think with the addition of the 1.2 acres in the northwest corner, as well as the excessive planting that we're going to see, in 10 years, I think this could be an excellent example of the kind of integration of residential and natural space. I haven't seen anybody else try to do something at this level of integration, and I would really like to see what can be done. I think it could end up being a very positive example for other developers. When we see somebody able to make things work, integrating with other developments adjacent to them, and delivering more than the required minimum level of open space, I think it would be foolish to turn it down on lack of public benefit when they're achieving the things that we put into public benefit policy to a great degree, and the flexibilities being requested are relatively minor. I think the safety issues are addressed with provisions we can put in for the southeast access point, and I don't see any other significant reason to reject. We should also consider the advantage that we get on Maple Hill Road, making a contact angle that is safer with Bass Lake Road. So there's a safety benefit to that point, and by approving, we could ensure that we minimize construction traffic through residential neighborhood for the neighborhood developing to the east, and avoid that having only a single road access point.
I think,
Go ahead.
do we have to put the motion as an affirmative in this case?
No.
Or can you make a motion to,
Deny,
okay,
which is what the motion was.
which is the same as not achieving potential? I'm just being, point of order.
Trying to think what you're getting at.
I'm just asking if it requires an approval of 4 of 5, is a motion to
Does the motion
deny
require the
if there
same
is-
4/5? I don't believe so.
No. Does the motion to deny that,
You would be accepting the resolution of denial, which you could do with a simple majority.
yeah. The only thing is that the PUD requires 4/5
To approve
to
the
approve.
resolution.
Is a denial that gets more than 2 votes the same as if not getting a 4/5 on an approval?
So
I think it would mean that, so typically, let's say that motion had been made the other way to approve, there was at least 2
Yeah.
no votes, then it would fail, then we would probably have to bring a motion to deny
Okay,
it,
so technically,
and then that would pass.
fair enough. So I wanna,
Potentially,
say that we are facing a deadline.
yes.
And so this isn't, the list is long, but I just don't feel like it's that meaty for the public benefits. And I think it's close, but time is up.
You want to send me a letter right now? Is that what you're saying?
I mean,
Yeah.
you're spending $2 million on roads that are not even.
that are off-site.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
you approve fairway shorts without anything like that. So, I mean, you have to be reasonable.
We're just,
You have to be reasonable.
I have
There's
a
lot of
pending
benefits.
motion.
Obviously, this is
Yep,
just-
we do have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on that? Thanks for reminding me. Then we will I'll call the vote. All those in favor, and for clarification, the motion is to deny.
To
All those
deny.
in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
No.
Okay, thank you. So that denies the application. I'm trying to think if there's further motions we need to make here.
No, that denies the entire application.
Okay.
Oh, for findings of fact, yes, so the findings of fact would help if we could bolster it. The language right now that was presented was very general information, just based off of what we put in our findings in the code. And so I think specifically, just some specific examples in this application as in paragraphs 3 and 7, so that I'm not guessing at what those standards are, then I can make those changes.
If everyone could
the
flip
resolution.
there and help Natalie out with,
I'm just gonna
Look to
stand by
where?
what I said.
could you try to summarize that just briefly, John?
Yeah, but in my opinion, I don't think the public benefits enough to give flexibility on PUDs.
I can't help it, according to the zoning.
Okay, and Mark,
I'm happy to share with you my comments in their entirety if that's helpful, but my concern was public safety in and out of a single entrance.
But there were 2 access points. What's the problem with that
I-
logic?
we're not gonna, we
I'm
can't debate at
entitled
this
to my
point, but
opinion, that's my opinion.
We just need the facts, for that resolution.
Okay.
Is that what you need?
Did you have anything to add?
I'd support those, that, I guess, a little more in depth, there was some of the flexibilities that I just was, kind of to John's point, not far off, but I'm not, quite there on the benefit outweighing that. And I think that's all of the motions and resolutions on that. Correct? Okay. We'll move on to, we have no unfinished business. We'll move on to new business. If we do have a public comment opportunity
Mr.
for,
Mayor?
yes.
Can I pause you briefly on it? Do you need an approval of a specific resolution, or are you?
Maybe just for formality, if we could specifically get a motion to approve, thank you, James, approve the alternative resolution for denial 2024-72 with those changes as discussed by the council, then we should be set to go on that.
So, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, then staff would just memorialize the denial as the resolution, I'm sorry, I don't remember, from the
2024-72.
2472 as amended. Is that correct?
Yes.
2472. Okay, does someone want to make that motion on resolution 2472 as amended?
I'm sorry?
Looking for a motion on the amended resolution, 2024-72.
I'll make a motion.
It's the amended for the inverse for,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
no worries. You'll make the motion, John, do I have a second?
Second.
Second Lanterman, any further discussion?
I'm confused.
It is just procedurally for Natalie to,
Approving the specific
Yep.
denial resolution, because before the motion was to just deny, and so we want to have a resolution approving, we want a motion to approve a specific resolution. So it's, the motion on the table would be to approve the alternative 2024-72, which denies the project, as amended with the findings provided by council.
that, yeah, understand, Dean? Maybe. Or you have another question?
No.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on that? And then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That carries. Thank you. I think that should be it on that one.
Yes.
Okay. On to 10, new business. We have a mid-year code enforcement update, and staff has a couple questions specifically for us amongst that.
Yeah, I did not prepare a slide deck for this one. Dwight did compile some data in terms of the total inspections completed and the typical violations that we're seeing. Since implementation of a warning letter before going to a violation notice, which was implemented not last year but the previous year, we have seen a number of a significant decrease in the cases that are going to the city attorney, and that is true again this year. So something to celebrate in terms of things reaching compliance before anything gets going into the court system for the most part. We had mostly storage nuisances this past year, weed nuisances. We've had a couple of home occupation violations that we've had to work through. Some sign violations, which are typically fairly easy to work through once they go through the permitting process. A few construction hour violations, which were captured in a previous discussion earlier this year. A couple animal nuisance violations, a couple public obstruction nuisances, one building nuisance, and then there were some other miscellaneous violations such as an unpermitted solar energy system is one that we are continuing to work through.
What's a public obstruction?
So something's like within the right of way, something's,
Oh,
yeah,
okay, okay.
or a trail, something like that,
Thank you.
blocking the flow of traffic. As far as questions on how to proceed, we've had two cases come up that's been a little bit unclear. One, came up with a seasonal agribusiness that's operating out of a residence without any registration or approval with the city, and that has been the case for a number of years. City staff sent a warning letter, which is our process once this really came to the forefront. With this property owner, the letters requested a meeting so that we could sit down with them, understand their operations, because we believed that the home occupation ordinance wasn't going to be something that they'd be able to operate under. We'd have to look at potentially adding a different use under code for agribusinesses. So we were trying to work with him, but he received this as...
Can we get clarification of that?
I'm trying not to say anyone's specific name.
I understand that,
I'm
but
happy to share with that outside of the meeting, but I wasn't, the intent
this one, I
here
think
is,
let's-
we've had situations where we've
What?
tried,
Let's keep it broad on this one for,
Okay, all right.
I'm
fair
happy to
enough.
provide specifics.
Because when you say somebody's operating an agribusiness, I'm like, well, so do a lot of people in our town.
Well, that's exactly right, but we are complaint-only model,
It
correct?
must have some specific thing that maybe whatever, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah,
I
well, I'm happy to
appreciate it.
provide all the specifics. I was just trying to do this in a way that didn't necessarily provide someone's name or location. But yes, I think you're correct that this is not the only agribusiness in the city, and I think there should be a pathway for it established, because as we celebrate our rural roots, why wouldn't we want to see some agribusinesses such as an apple orchard or a winery, I can't say the word, vineyard, thank you. Something like that where there might be some customers coming to the site, which is outside of the scope of our home occupation ordinance. Anyways,
Yeah, we just have to be considerate about the impact to the neighbors.
absolutely, and that's why it would have to be a code amendment process where we could take those considerations. Unfortunately, though, my attempt to work with this specific property owner, once we could no longer turn a blind eye to the situation, he felt harassed and did become fairly aggressive with multiple staff members, particularly when he couldn't get a hold of me directly. So the concern being, when we had the switch in city administrator, this kind of went to the bottom of priorities. We wanted to wait until before rocking the boat. And the concern is this is unresolved. This is an unresolved violation now from the end of 2022. And we have not really understood how best to move forward. The next process in the step would be to send this case to the city attorney. If the ultimate goal is compliance and knowing that he has already felt harassed, I can guarantee you that this will lead to further conversations with not just staff, but he'll probably be reaching out to council as well. So before we send it to the city attorney, if that's the next step, want to make sure that we're all on board on the same page with that. If it goes to the court system and then he does become more willing to work with us as far as a code amendment, we can always switch gears at that point. But that theoretically in our next process, the next step in the process, that's how it will move forward, and he's going to be upset. The next item is a business that there was a complaint submitted to the city that they had done some improvements. And it became clear that the improvements were completed without approval from the city council. They have met with city staff and have been fairly cooperative through the process. However, when they went to go get the private costs quoted, they were hit with a $10,000 bill. This is in addition to the city fees and escrows, the security that they would have to submit for any corrections they need to make as part of a site improvement performance agreement. And then they also, their septic system is failing. So that was really a priority for them this year to get that done. And so they can't do it all. And they had asked for an extension. So my question at this point is what would be a reasonable extension? I'm not business savvy. I have no idea what the expectation is for cash flow and how long. Would it be 3 months is a reasonable extension? Is 6 months a reasonable extension? Again, we could just send this to the city attorney's office, but if money is a constraint for them and compliance is the ultimate goal, I don't see what that would do. So an extension seems reasonable, but I also want to make sure that we keep momentum going forward. So just needing help identifying what would be a reasonable timeline. So those were my 2 areas I wanted to discuss tonight.
Thank you. Maybe I'll speak to the first one first. The agribusiness. I've seen some of what Natalie was talking about firsthand, and I agree with your assessment of it and how it's gone in the past, which I think is unfortunate because I think the general type of, obviously the devil's in the details, but the general type of use is something that this council would be generally supportive of trying to help, small business, agribusiness in that part of the city operate and be successful. But it doesn't seem likely that the owner is wanting to work with us on that. So I don't know if it's best to send it to the city attorney to try to go down that route, and then maybe that changes his attitude on it. I don't know.
Is this a code violation or is it a crime?
Code violation.
Well, technically codes are petty misdemeanors, I believe. So
Depends on which
both.
ones, but some of them are misdemeanors.
Okay.
I'm guessing this would be a zoning violation.
It is a zoning
which would likely
violation.
be a misdemeanor. Correct.
Have there been any types of threats?
Not to me directly, no. The biggest threat
Towing
was
the
he
line.
wanted to file a
Towing
police
the line.
report against me.
I'm towing the line, I
Oh,
think.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where you got more?
No.
I just always think about like equal protection clause, and we have to treat everyone the same. And so when somebody comes and says, my neighbor is doing this, we have an obligation that if it's against the code, we have to do what we can to the extent that we can as a city to enforce the zone. Otherwise, if we just selectively, like if I said, well, Natalie, tell me about this person, are they nice? Well, we can't do any of that. We have to, it's so black and white from our chair, to me, that we have to proceed along the route. Otherwise, we're not being fair to the person who's impacted by that.
I agree.
Have we let them know that that is an option for them? I think we did, to come in,
To do a zoning ordinance
to
amendment?
talk to council, to try to see if there's a route.
That was the letter, I specifically said that, I tried to set up a meeting to discuss their business operations. I made it very clear the intent was not to shut them down. The intent was to work with them to identify a pathway forward, which may include a discussion with council for a zoning ordinance amendment. So I tried, it's funny because, Bizey thought I was very strongly worded in the letter, and then when Jay looked at it, he said I was very wish-washy. So I think I told the line.
I thought it was pretty good. That's Jay.
Doesn't that say
Kinda
a million
wishy-washy.
things right there?
So I think I did a good job, but unfortunately, it must have hit a nerve, and he took it a very hostile. He was very hostile. Was his response back.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think you guys are right though, that,
We,
you know,
I'd love to hear more specifics and understand and be an understanding as possible. We can't get that unless he or
in,
she comes
yeah.
in front of us.
we would continue to
it's,
encourage and, let's say on the record, that we'd like to work with them, or, you know, at least look into that and hope that they'd come in. But absent that, I think we have to proceed with,
What John said.
I
agree.
So can I propose one potential alternative that I think will help staff? And this was discussed when I first arrived, is for me to make one effort to try and talk to them. So staff has tried. We talked about this as an alternative. And if at that level staff is still being rebuffed, then would request that we advance to the next level. So we will have exhausted all of our options. Right now, we have a department director that's tried. This would be the last of our capacity that we haven't exhausted yet in terms of my engagement. We talked about it, it just hasn't happened. So that is an alternative proposal to consider. As far as us demonstrating we've done everything that we can.
if you're comfortable with that.
Matt and I talked about it. So I'm not gonna pull up in my vehicle and say how do.
And I'll add, their business is fairly seasonal, so right now, and I think that's when I tried to reach out, because became aware of the situation. Again, we were aware of the situation for a few years, but it
It's
came
not
to the point where we
hidden,
couldn't
yeah.
ignore it
Yeah.
in winter of 2022. I intentionally did not reach out until 2023 with the idea of, I wanted it to be clear, I wasn't trying to shut down his business during the busiest season of the year. I wanted to try to have this handled before the next season. That effort did not work. So right now, they are not operating. My understanding, at least, is they are not operating. They don't really go until full swing into winter. So now might be a good chance to try one more time, because technically we can't even do the violation notice until winter when they're operating again. So we do
Right.
have a bit of time to work through that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I would submit that strategy's worked fairly well with some of our other businesses in town in terms of, hey, can we chat? And we've been able to come to some resolution about some longstanding issues.
Yeah.
So,
That works for me, if it works for the rest of council.
Yeah. Absent that, then we just proceed.
Yep,
Okay.
yep,
Sounds
and we
good.
don't have a choice at that point.
So we're calling this Tobin option and then,
Tobin option to see if it works and to see if they're willing to work with us, and then if not,
okay.
then we'll have to go by what the code is.
I like Plan T.
Plan T.
The second one is kind of an opposite situation, as Natalie mentioned, where it's a business that is wanting to cooperate seemingly. They have been cooperative, have some financial issues and some other projects that have tied up capital potentially. And I guess the question is, what is a reasonable accommodation if we want to give one that we can?
And the reasonable combination is related to the septic? or
No.
So
other
I
things?
think they're kind of out of options, and they need to be able to connect to city sewer and water this year. I think their septic is failing, and
Okay.
so I think that really is a priority for them right now. And I think I would be hard up to say that isn't a priority. So then the question is, the accommodation would be as far as getting a site plan, because he has to get a site plan drawn up by a private surveyor, and then going through the city approval process, which also has costs and can be significant. Just the deposit for this process would probably be at least I think it's about at least $3,500 for the escrow plus fees. And then if there is any kind of site improvement performance agreement on the back end, there's a financial security component. So the fees start to add up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so I think at this point, in order to allow them to get some cash flow, what would be a reasonable timeline? And I'm asking for your opinion because, again, I'm not a business owner. I don't know what would be a reasonable time to save up at least $10,000.
But the 10,000's for their,
That's just for the private surveyor to draw up a site plan and some engineering plans. and a certificate of survey.
And then what about the rest of the costs?
There's additional costs, so that's what I'm saying, so just to save up that much, if
So
that's-
they need help on this, and then are they gonna come back to the well to ask for more?
I don't know that at this point. I'm just trying to figure out what a reasonable extension would be to try to allow them to get some more capital ready to move forward with this
Would they be
project.
doing the work now?
Well, that's the unfortunate problem. The parking lot was already expanded before they understood that they needed to have that be approved as part of the site plan. And I think, without knowing for sure with a survey, I believe it might be in the setback. So what's going to happen with this is they're either going to need to remove the parking lot improvement, potentially,
Okay.
if it is within the setback. I don't know yet. They might have to remove a portion of it, or they might have to relocate it, but there's some kind of site improvement that may potentially be needed, and there may be a variance component as part of the request.
Okay.
So that's kind of where, again, I don't know until I see a survey, and having that drawn up, there's some cost to it.
Gotcha.
I don't wanna sound callous by what, but why is there cash flow problems our issue?
It's not, but ultimately, my understanding is code enforcement, the ultimate goal is compliance. That is ultimately the goal. So we could move this forward to the city attorney, but then now they have to get capital for an attorney to represent them. And so if the concern is capital flow, and we just ultimately want them to comply,
And if there's a going from, if
then it
they're
doesn't
trying to
necessarily
comply
help
now, it might
get
not.
them to a point where they can afford the approval process.
They don't have to get an attorney.
No,
I mean, it's not like they have to hire a
That's
$2,000 an hour attorney to go and talk to a judge about some
That's true.
city ordinance.
again, the ultimate goal is to get them to comply, and if the ultimate goal is we want them to get here, why would we waste their time with court proceedings when the ultimate goal would be for them to come here to get their approvals?
I think a reason why is because these things can drag on forever. And we've had so many instances of we had someone with a zone violation that went back to the court 6 times and got an extension, and it went on for like 3 years. And I don't even know if that's resolved or not, but that was, I almost think it's almost like the same thing as before, where we have some obligation to the city, but, and they have options that doesn't involve Corcoran not giving them a special favor. Because otherwise everybody would come in here and say, oh man, my car broke down last week and I gotta get a, if this is a prevention of excuse mongering to the nth degree, not saying they're doing it, but if you open that door and say, if you come in here with a sad story, we won't enforce code against you.
Could it say something in terms of the character of this transaction, differentiating from the last one? The orientation of the business owner has been, I want to comply, and I'm constrained. And so I think, just speaking candidly, I'm not disagreeing with the position that why is their financial capital problems our problem. It ultimately becomes our problem because they don't have the resources to comply, and we want them to comply. That's how it becomes our problem. And so if the goal of code enforcement is to help them comply, are we going to achieve our desired end state with that strategy? That's my question.
And I'll just add to,
Go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, just to interject something that maybe the council would want to, and I think what Councilmember Bottomont and Administrator Tobin just discussed is the perfect counterbalance for this consideration. It wouldn't be something you do on an everyday basis, or it wouldn't be something you do commonly, but it would be something you would do in a situation where you had a serious and pressing nuisance situation that needed to be corrected immediately, but finances were the only barrier, and you were in a position to help. One thing that you could consider doing is contracting for the work yourself under an assessment agreement, and you could assess incrementally back to the property the cost of that would effectively finance the project for them, get it done. You could charge interest at a rate you set. So it isn't a handout, but it would allow you to potentially negotiate an immediate resolution of the issue and collect the costs on a delayed basis. So that's something you can consider. Again, I understand Councilmember Votto's point that you don't want it to be, you're not a bank and you don't want to turn into one, but, you know, for specific one-off scenarios, you could entertain that as well. I just wanted to throw that out.
Appreciate it.
And I just
I
want,
hear you, Jay.
Let's do
So I'm okay with that.
John, Natalie,
Matters.
Dean.
okay, sorry, the other thing I'll say is, the success rate here where we have the things not going into the city attorney, and because we have a compliance, is really for the most part, my approach to code enforcement has been if they're communicating with me, if they're making progress, then I'm not gonna send it to the city attorney. Now, once they stop communicating with me, once they haven't done a single thing to start resolving the solution, that's when I send it. And so we're at a point where he's still communicating with me, but he hasn't been able to get the finances in place to move forward with actually starting to resolve. And he might have made some savings in this way. I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily $0 have been saved towards it. He knows it's coming. Really what I'm looking for in this instance, since it's a business, I'm trying to understand what a reasonable timeline we think. Maybe it's 2 months, maybe it's more than that, I don't know. Whereas like with a residential code enforcement, I feel like it's a little easier to just see progress towards cleaning up junked vehicles and okay, we've got 3 removed, let's keep moving forward. And I usually do it on about a 2 to 4 week extension and then eventually put them on kind of an agreement where there's targets they have to hit if it gets really serious. This is just a little different in that ultimately they have to go through a site plan approval process, and that's ultimately what we have to get to. So that's kind of, West Side Tire is an extreme example, and I don't want it to necessarily drag on years like that one did. But so I'm thinking more within a couple of months. But is it 2 months? Is it 6 months? That's where I'm at.
And I guess the only caution there would be if it's 6 months, we're really talking about something being done as early as next summer.
I think it's possible even if we were to rush it for 2 months, and that might be true. But even if we're talking about something submitted in 2 months, it's
Yeah,
likely
good.
that would be next year anyways
It's
too.
possible.
Yep.
How much time are they asking for? Instead of us saying,
Yeah.
well, 1 month is reasonable, 2
Have they
weeks
asked
is
for
reasonable.
anything specific?
What are they asking for? Or, I
He-
mean,
last call I had with him, he was just asking for anything. So I think he just, because I had given him a deadline and he wasn't able to meet it. And so at this point, I'm just trying to understand, like, I already thought I tried to give a reasonable deadline, and that was not doable.
how long was that?
That was in the last couple of weeks.
No, I mean, how long of a,
So I
did
gave,
you offer him an extension already and he
I
couldn't do it?
didn't really
or-
offer him an extension, I just gave him a deadline of when I needed
Okay.
to see the plan submitted.
All right.
Yeah.
Would you anticipate there being any actual changes on the ground when he goes through this process?
Until I understand the intent of how bad they might be within the setback, I don't know the answer to that.
Natalie, maybe you should ask me.
Oh, hi! I didn't see you there.
We'd
I
like,
wanted to see what everybody said. What I said.
if you'd like to speak, please come on up.
Yeah, I know you have a lot of questions. I'm the owner that she's referring to.
Gotcha.
And yes, from all the changes in my business, we have a lot of time, money constraints. So we want to do one thing at a time, and that the sewer and water is very important for me to change. It's been sitting out there, I gotta change it, I gotta hook up to it. That costs a lot of money. And all of a sudden I get nailed with this $6,500, $10,000 for the site plan. And I made a very small change to my lot, very small. Only because there was trees there falling down, dying, it fell down, back this last, I think it was a storm last week, right? There was a storm last week and they would have fell down right on a very expensive car.
You're talking the pines right out front?
Yes.
Yep,
We have
okay.
up and down. Counselor, can't speak.
That's okay, you can call me Dean.
Dean, Counselor Dean, is very aware of what we have going on over there, and the pine trees just have to be cut down, so it's sitting there with mucky old water and dirty old dirt, and so we just smoothed it out, put some fabric down like you would very small parking lot. We have 30 parking spots, times 5 more spots, maybe 6 more spots. Do a little math on that, that's less than 5% change. And we're allowed 10.
Do we make a motion in this situation?
No, I just wanted to understand what a reasonable timeline would be for an extension.
Do you have a timeline that you think,
Well, our plan is.
Sorry.
is
No,
to
no,
add
that's
on
good, that's a
to
good
the
question.
business.
Sorry, go ahead. Could you
Our
repeat
plan
that?
is to add on to the business.
Okay.
So we were thinking we do it then. I don't think that's unreasonable.
And
Get
when
our
is
sewer
that?
hooked up, we plan, and within about a year, we plan on trying to build on the business, because we're bursting at the seams. it's
So
just
a year, is that what I heard? Would that be
about a
suitable?
year.
I would be okay with that.
So just real quick though, on a comparison about the automotive repair shop across the street went through all of this to add on and everything, and that was, everything was in compliance, correct? Were there issues with that?
Yeah, so they were
across
adding to the
street?
building, and that's what I think he's saying, that they're looking to add to the building as well, and so he's hoping he can just do it all at once, if I'm understanding correctly.
Okay,
And we could have a contract drawn up where the 1-year deadline is memorialized, if that's agreeable to council.
he was,
no, I understand. I just, the trees came down. What he should have done was clean
So,
them up,
it's
put in dirt and planted in grass, and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Correct.
Okay.
There might need to be a CUP amendment for business operations, because it sounds like some of that's changed too, but again, that might be better handled as part of the building, if they're increasing bays at all. It might be better to handle it all at once.
Is the problem that there's parking there now, and there wasn't
Yes,
parking
it's a
before?
parking, it's essentially, it's a parking lot. The parking lot was expanded.
Okay.
oh, just by happenstance.
The
Yeah.
trees came out,
Functionally, though, too.
Oh, okay.
And,
the trees were at the
Yeah.
edge of the mound system, I'm
Mm-hmm.
assuming that's your mound out front and stuff. The trees came down,
Oh, okay.
and let's throw down gravel, because at some point we're gonna expand, and somebody brought up the subject, and it's so be it, so.
We're not gonna plant dirt in there and plant grass in there. We gotta have an access to the mound, which is right there, and the mound's gotta be removed. So our plan is to probably turn that into a parking lot, and then we'll just be approached to that parking lot. And that's why we didn't replant anything.
Yeah,
It was a future thought.
If it just didn't have cars on it, would that be a code violation? Would that eliminate the complaint?
I believe there'd still be a code violation because of the width of the driveway now, and how the location of where it is. I don't, that could certainly be potentially, understanding the meantime is that gravel area cars shouldn't be parked on, but I still believe there is a code violation, yes. But again, is it something that we could handle in a year with a larger remodel and have it be a cleaner process rather than putting it through it twice? Yeah.
when I look at this, it's somewhat like that entire, all those industrial parks and businesses, we delayed making people hook up to sewer and water for up to 2 years and such. Is this a similar situation other than the remodel that's planned also? Can we?
Yeah, I think we did that because we
Could
were
we-
concerned about the financial
Yup.
practicality.
And that
practicalities,
helped
yeah.
out, I'm looking at like for like,
Mhm.
would this be the same kind of thing? Could it be written the same way as us delaying their hookups to do? Is there a way that there's a stage of hooking the sewer and water, and then assessments come, and it's like our attorney mentioned and stuff, could that be one part of the phase and the rest is the whole plan in a year? Is that what you're looking, is that what we're looking for, is hook up the sewer and water now? Or,
Gone through starting the process of hooking.
Yeah, so I think
Okay.
that was a project he was planning on this year, and that's where the priority has been set. So I-
and that'll be paid for?
that he's taking care of
That's
that.
done,
Yeah,
or will be
yeah.
done.
But I
And
think to
so
your
then-
point, you can make the argument that we've done that similarly, and this is could be seen as a comparable flexibility that we're offering.
To just add it as to an entire project and.
Yeah, and maybe try to eliminate the parking from it now.
Yeah, we could
But
maybe try to
the-
ask him to put, I'd have to take a look to, Dwight's the one that's really been doing the
Yeah.
code enforcement inspections. I'd have to understand what could possibly be done to avoid parking in that area for now. And then we'd have a compliance agreement that sets the deadline of 1 year from today. Plans need to have been received to move forward in the CUP site plan approval process, and we could certainly, at that point, deal with the building expansion as well. So that could definitely be something we work through as staff.
So we're,
Can we, where it hits the ditch, I do a certain amount, say setback maybe, that maybe the word I'm supposed to be using, for parking lots.
From the property line.
From the property line or the ditch.
Yeah, it's
right away.
so it's the parking
If we brought
area is
back-
supposed to be 25 feet from the property line. So it's a little different than the ditch, but again, without the survey, I'm gonna have a hard time. So I can do a rough measurement, what it would be from the ditch.
Can we just grant you flexibility and give you some kind of concepts, and you guys can just figure out what he needs to
what
do?
what the form of that looks
I
like.
think from the discussion
Yeah.
so far, if you're okay with my summary, that I can
I think
work
we're
through
okay with
some
that kind of game plan of
Yeah.
those.
It's an existing business and
Yep.
we have in the past assisted the other businesses to get to where they want to get to. I mean, again, to go across the street and compare apples to apples might be two different things, but we help them get to where they want to go with some setbacks and
Yeah.
those kind of things.
Yeah, with
And-
ProTech across the street, we
Yeah.
granted them 3 variances to try to work through where they were trying to go. So, we do try to,
Yeah.
there's been a couple examples, within this area specifically where we've tried to provide extensions and try to work with them
Okay, so we aren't doing
I think we've
something
got general
to somebody that we haven't done to others.
Yep.
So that's my only
Thank you, Phil.
concern.
Yeah,
today.
appreciate you coming, that's helped, very helpful.
I've been here 35
Yeah.
years.
We are grossly aware of it,
Yes.
and a lot of people
We love
talk good about you, so appreciate
Never
you
heard a
being
better
there.
thing, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for the collaboration. Before we exit,
Now, if you know the other guy that she was talking about, tell him we aren't so
Yeah.
bad.
before we exit code enforcement,
Yes.
because we are complaint-based, I wanted to raise an issue for council to be aware of, that there are code requirements around new construction having landscaping installed within 30 days of certificate of occupancy being issued. And that is a code enforcement item. And because of that, it's a complaint-based item. So I, as a resident, would like to complain about the Walcott Glen development not installing sod in the homes that have been occupied since April. I would also like to complain about the lack of removal of invasive species like buckthorn and poison ivy, so that can start the process.
And that would be more of a development agreement.
Ideally, it would be going forward.
So the problem with buckthorn is, it is challenging for code enforcement to go out there in our current capacity. We have one, but we can certainly try to take a look if you, especially if we're able to access from your property. But
Gotta get past Hugo.
it can be, it can just, it's challenging, and then my understand of buckthorn specifically is that,
It's gotta come up with the roots.
it's got,
period.
well, and even then if you don't catch it all, it can come
It
back.
still reseeds
And then
itself.
if it's a shared property line and the other side isn't removing it at the same time, it can just lead, it's a lot to manage. I can certainly have Dwight take a look and we can do what we can. I just wanna make it clear that we have one code enforcement officer, and he's also our new planner, so there's a lot on his plate. And I don't wanna overpromise success on that, but I do understand that that's something we need to look at and figure out how we can proceed.
In Shakopee, I contracted goats for the buckthorn.
Fine by me.
That's what my son is
I've heard success
studying
stories.
is,
Goats?
no, removal of buckthorn. It's a passion
Oh.
of his.
Well, there
So
might be a
maybe
job
he
for
can
him
help us
there.
figure some of that out.
Yeah, that's, If he figures it out, he'll make a ton of dollars. It's really hard.
It
hire
did
him.
come up in Woodland Hills, and we did put that in the agreement, which was good to see. But you're right, it's gonna take some sustained effort, maybe even beyond the point where homes are sold, to continue to control it until it's actually eliminated.
Yeah, that's why it's like I want to be able to eventually close out the development. I'm just worried is eventually it's going to have to be the person who's living there's fault, or the responsibility, I should say fault, responsibility to be removing it and be in compliance with our nuisance ordinance. So.
For the buckthorn, that's what goes, but for the sod.
Oh yes, the sod.
Sod is an easy thing, isn't it?
So
Or should be.
the resolution, I'm sorry, the development contract tonight. The expectation is that the sod and topsoil, sod, and front yard trees need to be installed prior to certificate of occupancy for that development, with the exception of really winter time and when there is excessive rain like we had earlier, it can be very difficult to get that completed. So, but again, they'd have to work with us to let us know specifically what lots they're requesting flexibility from on, and we would identify a reasonable timeline as to, if it's January, then, April 1st, May 1st to get the sod in.
I think what, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think what you're trying to avoid is like, I know when I moved in, I was, I think about 11 months without sod.
Yeah, so I think that's, and then I would also add that we want to start doing certificate of occupancy inspections. That's actually been something on Michael Pritchard's list of something he's wanted to start implementing, so that we do have better enforcement of some of these concerns that are happening because we don't have that type of inspection quite yet. So it's a little different than the building permit inspection. It's tied to that certificate of occupancy, but there's these items that a building inspector isn't looking for.
Right.
So it's something he would like to take on. The question is what's coming off his plate, or what additional capacity are we able to do, so.
Can West Metro do that kind of inspection as well, as part of their service?
I would like to talk with Mike about it. There's a reason why I think that he would like it be something that he's taking on versus having Metro West do it, so.
Would maybe the development superintendent also be able to help in that aspect?
No, they're more engineering, so this would be the landscaping, and so just getting better processes in place. So it's something that's been on our radar, and I think this will force the issue. It was already something that we wanted to get a clear process in, so it'll be a goal for us in 2025. I'll add it to our community development department strategic plan, so.
Can I ask a question, kind of related?
Sure.
Is there a requirement that people who have second-story sliding glass doors need to get their decks on their house? Can we add that to, that drives me nuts, and it looks horrible.
Like a time frame, you mean?
Yeah, you can't have a sliding glass door with no deck on the second story.
So they do have to have it to
They're
pass
boarded
building
off.
permit, it is boarded off on the inside. The idea is eventually they will be getting a
No, I
deck,
get it, it
yeah.
looks from the outside. It looks like,
We can look into it.
We can look into it,
it's really, really
It doesn't look
tacky.
good, yeah.
I
And
think
it makes,
yeah.
and if you can't afford to put a deck on, buy a different house.
Or take out the patio door.
Or do something.
We can look into it. I think some things too are, it's preference.
Well,
and trying to regulate preference.
Then don't
can
put
be
a,
difficult,
don't put
but
sliding glass doors.
Or you might limit it to things that are facing major public arterial roads.
Something like that.
Sure.
Yeah,
We can certainly look into it.
that'd be great.
Then I can file complaints against all those
Not
new
me.
houses with, huh?
Is it not me? I got
No,
big,
I'm
got big
talking
wraparound
about,
deck.
I don't drive in your neighborhood. Not in men's clothes.
I think it's particular with the PUD that could certainly be a requirement. So.
Jeez. We digress. Sorry. Natalie was saying something.
Oh, no, I was saying particularly with the PUD, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to add that in terms of houses along major roadways would need to be constructed with a deck if they're going to have a sliding door on the second level. But that, as far as adding it to a standard plat, I'd have to look at how we could handle that.
If we could just look into it and bring it back at some point, that'd be great.
All right, sorry, I
No.
completely digress.
Totally fine. Appreciate you bringing it up. Next on the agenda, let's see here, staff reports. We just have the project planning update, which is in the packet. And I did add 2 really brief mayor reports. One was Jeremy brought this up last meeting, and John's brought this up several times. But now, Mark and I attended the last Met Council virtual meeting. My alarm bells are ringing like crazy, with the 4 units an acre density that they seems that they've decided on. And some of the other policy provisions that they're talking about changing, or seemingly have already decided to change for the 2050 plan. Just wanted to make that public. Jay and I did get an email from Judy Johnson, our Met Council rep for this area. Probably plan on setting up a meeting with her in the coming weeks to at least voice those concerns to her directly. Don't know if it'll make a difference, but I think the more noise any one of us or anyone that's concerned about it can make, the better, because that would be a very substantial change to the entire city and how we develop, and that 1 unit an acre increase minimum would make a very big difference. So
Huge.
Yeah.
Why?
they
What is
haven't
the
been able to
reason?
articulate a very good reason to me. That's part of my frustration.
Flex.
They keep saying, we're not gonna require you to develop more, we're just gonna require you to develop at a higher density. To me, that's developing more, but,
No, because towns can expand.
except for they wanna change that, so that you can't change.
No, but by
can't
saying
use that.
more flexible, or more per acre, if only towns could actually expand
Right.
the area.
Then I guess, yeah, then it would maybe work, but yeah, it's.
I think we would need to seriously consider what zoning changes we could make to preserve the rural character that we have.
Yes,
that were
if
to
it does
proceed.
pass, and that's what I wanna get some clarification on, is this going to pass, is there any input? Will this be discussed further before it is implemented? If it is implemented, when would that be effective date by, when would that start being enforced? There has been some discussion on, does it count towards all of your existing land, so like stuff that's already been platted, which would be an absolute nightmare versus all the newly platted stuff. So hopefully they at least will make it the worst case scenario. But in any of those cases, there'd be substantial planning work that we would need to do for our 2050 plan. That would be significant changes because of the significant change they forced, so.
Is it possible to reduce the size of the MUSA?
Well, Dayton's mayor asked that at the meeting, and they pretty much told him no.
What does John say?
But this is what they're talking about, changing it might be possible
In the new comp plan.
now. Well, it might be possible now, but they want to change that in the new comp plan.
So my.
Natalie was on the call too.
Yeah, well, and my understanding too with taking things out of the MUSA, with a couple of planners who I know who've been a part of public hearings where that's happened, if you have willing property owners, it might be less of a battle, but property owners who've been in the MUSA and have to made financial decisions based on the expected value of their property, that can be there can be some political will against such a decision too. So it would be a decision that would have to go through a public hearing to notify the affected property owners, and they might be totally on board. I don't know the answer to that without going through the exercise, but I think it'd be something we would want to make sure that we have that it shouldn't be a public hearing that they're hearing about that for the first time. We'd want to probably have some workshops around that idea, and to try to have it be a collaborative effort, but.
On a positive note, the last time Judy Johnson came to town and brought some Met Council reps, we were able to get clarification and add a different category. So just remembering that in terms of a potential collaborative spirit before we get.
Yeah, no, and I will say Judy, Met Council, I think we all have our frustrations with Judy, makes an effort to try to help when she can. She definitely has a collaborative spirit, and I appreciate her efforts on there. I worried that even if she fully agreed with us, that there's still not enough to change a policy of Met Council with how big they are, but.
So we have that land use advisory committee. It's made up by representatives from the districts. And it's mostly elected officials. And in that land use advisory, and it's sort of like districts not based on population. There are like 4 super loud people who want to do the, add density everywhere, and especially here, cause they don't live here. And then, but the rest of the governing body is against it. So they,
Okay.
and so they, because people want local control, and they don't want some, extreme, intra-corridor politicians deciding what goes on in their town. But, so there's a ton of pushback from the official body that's supposed to give them pushback,
Gotcha.
except they don't care.
They don't have to take it.
Yeah, they don't care, they're nominated by the governors, there's one,
They're going through the process.
well, no, there's only one left from Tim Pawlenty, otherwise every other one has not been
Interesting.
Tim Pawlenty's party, so they're, all the governors are, and the leaders at Met Council are just wear the same stripe.
Yeah, it's a product of all being appointed, not elected for how much power they have as a governmental entity. I will tell a very brief story that I thought was pretty funny. After attending that meeting, virtual meeting with Mark, and not being in the best mood, I started digging into some random Met Council videos. I knew you were, John, on a advisory board, but I didn't know which one. We spoke about this briefly. And start watching, I was doing some work, start listening on YouTube to one of the meetings, and all of a sudden I hear this guy kind of speaking up at one of the meetings, and he's getting fired up, and he's talking about, how this has a really adverse impact to cities that are just developing now, and just makes this great argument. I'm like, that is exactly what I was trying to say. And sure enough, I look up there and it's John. So, thought that was pretty funny.
That's someone thinks they speak.
At one point of clarification, Mr. Mayor, there will be a comment period too, so there will be a period where I think there's going to be, it'll be very clear where we'll be accepting comments, and so there'll be an opportunity for comments to be submitted, so.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring this up, and I don't know if now is the appropriate time or not, but it's come to my attention that more than one city council member has been approached by applicants requesting private meetings or breakfasts or coffees. And when I looked into it, I don't see that that's prohibitive. But I think that it's bad form. I think the optics are bad. I think that it's unfair for council members to meet privately with one applicant and not other applicants. So I just wanted to throw it out that I know this is happening because I was contacted. And I know for a fact that other council members have been contacted. And I just think that we should have, I don't know if it requires a formal policy. I think that we should just agree not to do it because it looks bad and it just doesn't smell right. John, do you have any thoughts on this?
Thank you, Councilmember Lanterman, members of council. I think that you're correct. We have to be very careful in our conversations with applicants, with open applications in particular. I think that having some consistency in those lines of communication is important, and I think involving staff whenever possible is a valuable thing. In addition to kind of formalizing the process and having the information gathered that way. There's someone else in the room that can say what happened too. I mean, and so I think if part of your concern is raising about suggestions of conflict or bias or anything like that, there's somebody else that can attest to what was said in those meetings too. So while they're not prohibited, you're correct. I think you're right, we should be careful when we do that. And to the extent that the purpose of the meeting is to talk about an open application, there's a staff path, I think, for that's probably more appropriate.
Thank you.
Is this specifically related to developments or just anything, or?
Well, I was contacted about a development, and a developer and an applicant wanted to sit down with me.
Oh, okay.
And I declined. I just think that if you meet with one, you gotta meet with them all. And if you can't meet with them all, don't meet with any of them. And if there's something to say, put it in the packet.
Yeah, so sometimes people will call and say, like at their house, they'll, oh, I'm trying to do this and this and this. And I tell them sometimes, I kind of feel like I'm a tour guide to city code for like the regular guy. But what you're talking about, it's just specifically related to developments, not going to some, people call us and they want our help because it's so hard to navigate city stuff sometimes.
Well, I'm sure that we all get phone calls. What I'm talking about is a one-on-one conversation where a vote here puts money in someone's pocket, a development. And I just think that it's, inappropriate, and I don't think we should do it. I think that if a developer, if an applicant wants to talk to us, put it in the packet. Do your talking in the packet, do it in front of everyone. There shouldn't be these backdoor conversations, because like John mentioned, let's say I meet with an applicant and I say, you know what, I really like this. Well, if it doesn't go through, they can say, well, that's bias for, or if I said no, that's bias against. Someone is not going to be happy with whatever decision you make. And, with certainty, if you sit down for coffee with a developer, someone's going to have a recorder on that. And I just think it's bad practice, and I wouldn't want to give anyone the appearance that they're backdoor deals or, at meeting, I'm not really for this. Well, let me explain to you why you should vote yes. Oh, yeah, okay. That conversation should never happen. Okay, if there's something important to say, tell staff, put it in the packet. So I just wanted to throw that out because, I think it's, I think it's tacky, and I just think that it's inappropriate, and it doesn't feel right.
Jeremy?
I have a similar practice. I have one exception in that if somebody is a resident, I'll meet with a resident. But I routinely decline to meet with developers who are not also a resident. And the number that are both has been very, very small. But I like the suggestion of trying to do it in the presence of staff where you can coordinate that. I feel like that does add an additional layer of objectivity that can be helpful.
I think that practice has actually occurred in my short
That's typically
tenure
what I've
here.
done, yeah.
Yeah, so there have been multiple staff members there, and those instances, I think, was less about persuasion and more trying to make good planning, some significant strategic impact. That they're like, hey, I don't want to misstep this, so can you? And they actually met with all the council members, with staff.
I'll just add one thing too, is this is just a change in policy and how we've handled it. So please forgive any applicants that might reach out to you in the meantime that might be working on advice from previously provided, was to reach out to council members, because that had been the direction I had received under Brad and Visey. So just please keep that in mind if someone has reached out to you recently. I know of, for specific one applicant group I'm thinking of, that they're going off of staff's advice. And so if we were changing a policy, I can certainly, we can certainly change that policy. I have no problem with that, or have it be, I think right now I usually tell them to try to set it up with no more than 2 council members and with Jay or myself there. And if we want to move away from that as well, then we can certainly stop providing that advice. But I think the idea, again, is to try to have some collaboration.
Yeah.
A lot of times they want to offer a site visit so you can see some of the constraints that they're working with. Like, for example, Woodland Hills had that buffer yard question, and it was a lot more better to go to the site and see what they're talking about. You don't necessarily get all that from a plan. I'm trying to get to a point in community development where we have a couple of drone pilots, so we can have some kind of drone footage for sites, so we don't necessarily need to do a site visit. That has been kind of the goals previously. It's been more about trying to just explain their goals and try to understand some concerns that you might have that they can try to work through and address. So again, we can totally change the policy. Just keep in mind that there might be some people going off of advice that's now old, so.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jay, in terms of what my experience has been in terms of doing it with staff, and kind of the goals of those meetings have been separate from trying to like persuade me or persuade the council member just to vote with this, because it's more been how should we tackle this, trying to collaborate, trying to figure out some technical aspects of a code or of their plan. So I wouldn't want to come down overly prohibitive on that. But I do think maybe if we're concerned about it, if you're going to meet, trying to do it at City Hall with someone from staff is probably a good protection, if we're concerned about that.
Work session, if it's that important.
I think we have one.
We don't have to accept it.
Yeah.
Public comment.
What's that?
They can use public comment as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That actually might be more efficient too.
Yeah,
So I would say there are a couple people who are developing that I got to listen to their pitch 3 or 4 times because they were wanting to meet with a council member, and I was insisting that a staff member be there. And so in terms of best and highest use of everyone's time and everybody getting the same message, that actually might be a good solution.
I think it's especially relevant since we've had, I want to say, acrimonious relationship with the builders.
Yeah. Fair.
I don't necessarily trust them.
Yeah, and I would say for sure no one should feel pressured to if they don't want to meet with Lake Jeremy's policy kind of has been, and that's typically when I've been asked that, will the other council members meet with me? Maybe, no, so, and that's been your policy from day one, I think, and so, yeah, certainly no pressure to do that if you're not comfortable with it by any means, I would say.
I went to look at the buffer. That was
Yeah.
my,
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that was actually a really help to Natalie's point, that we didn't have the technology before to provide that perspective.
And we still don't, to be clear, they're
Yeah,
not piloted yet.
wait,
Yeah, that's gonna take about 4 months.
2025 goal.
Hold on one second, we did it.
It could be lack of understanding. What is the value in having those side meetings? If they're going through planning, they're getting feedback, they're meeting with you. All I'm saying is the risk is so much greater that probably unconscious bias might even happen. That, well, like, why not just do a policy to not have it unless they were adding significant value for you guys rather than them in those conversations?
Yeah, I agree. And part of the reason why I have the policy that I do is if they can meet with everybody individually, they can triangulate and pick the bare minimum to satisfy 3 people or 4 people.
Yeah.
And if they're confronting everybody at once, they'll get a more balanced view and they won't be able to triangulate as much. So I feel like from a strategic negotiation perspective, it's better if we're together than if we're separated.
I couldn't agree more. If I were a developer, I would watch the past 6 months of city council meetings and try to figure out who's on board. Who likes walking trails? I got to throw a walking trail into my app. This guy I'm not so sure about. Hey, councilman, you're great. I'd really like to meet with you. Down at Peg's for coffee, and I just want to get your view on a few things. And maybe salespeople, and when there's money at stake, you can persuade people to change their minds on things.
100%. I just
And-
think it doesn't have value to you. Unless it's really valuable for you guys to have extra time
Why
with the
do it?
developer.
it's
Right.
Why are you doing it?
Right, exactly.
I can probably say in 8 years I've met with 4 people, it's just not a good use of my time.
Fair enough.
You can call me,
It's,
or whatever.
I'm one opinion out of 5 that you've gotta talk to. It'd be best you talk to the group. What do you think about this? I can tell you what I think, but I'd rather you talk to the whole group. And then I pick up my check and they pick up theirs and walk away.
But should we even be
Don't dig
telling
that
them
deep.
what we think?
Well, I think we do need to be careful about
Yeah, we gotta be careful, but I'm
telegraphing
trying
how
to
we
think
may
all the
vote.
conversations I've had with, and I don't know of anybody. I mean, Jay came and we jumped on a couple of events. with
Yeah, those
some
are the
people.
ones that I was talking about,
Yeah.
and in each of those cases, they were residents.
Right,
So, you know, several of you talked with them based upon a similar philosophy.
yeah,
And admittedly, that was, you know, as I talked with staff, that was the practice. But Natalie and I talked about that a lot as we were doing that. I was like, this is different than my previous experiences. And I agree with the potential risk that's been echoed by both our attorney and one of our commissioners. When you look at your juice to squeeze ratio, it might be a little off.
Yeah, I think for some of the more complicated discussions, if we're okay with having more work sessions to try to address it when there's a contentious issue or something that staff is having trouble communicating with an applicant. 'Cause I think those are the kind of the things that have come up in the past. In the recent couple months, it's been, they felt that maybe staff was directing them the wrong way, and so they were trying to get council's feedback because they wanted a
That's
different
exactly what
answer. They wanted to do that before moving forward with their application. So, if we're okay with scheduling more work sessions where that can be talked through, if needed, then I think that that would be a way to do that, to get in front of you. I think public comment, the challenge with that, is typically we're not supposed to respond back to public comment, we're just supposed to note it, and then you're supposed to direct staff to follow up.
I absolutely do not want to have, to do a special, unless it's super unique, do a special, work session for anyone, any builder. If, they're just gonna have to come,
we open it up by giving them the concept plan time. With very little investment, they can come and present a concept to us, correct? I mean, that's what we've done.
Yes, but there's a particular development team most recently who we couldn't get them to do a concept plan for over a year and a half. And then they still wanted to have sit-down meetings because they did not like the direction that staff had provided to that point. And I believe there were sit-down meetings with at least a couple different council members, so.
Yeah, in that instance, it wasn't until we got the sit-down meetings that we nailed down the issue, and that's why we're doing the significant review of our rural commercial
Right.
zoning.
Right.
That's a direct result of that
So they
sitting
didn't do the
down,
concept plan
because they
until
refused to
they
do the
sat down with
concept plan.
council, because they
Yeah.
refused to take my direction. So I think that's where we're hitting some hiccups.
They were told to come to council for over
Over
a
a
year, and it was only when they did the sit-down with me and council members that we finally got to the heart of the issue, which
Right.
was the zoning issue. So I guess in some ways you could say that's a success story of that strategy, but it would have been easier if the developer had just done what they were supposed to do from the get-go and come with
Right.
the concept plan. Now too, in that same conversation, and those of you who are in, we now have a roadmap that makes it very, very clear. And as they come in with their application, they receive a copy of that roadmap in terms, that didn't exist before. We had a roadmap, but it was in words, it wasn't pictograph. It was a little bit difficult to interpret. And so now, you know, we'll find out. We haven't had similar problems yet.
Yeah, kind of. We have one team right now that's not getting it.
Oh, yeah, we were talking
And I
about
don't know
that
why. I don't know what
Yeah.
further I can do to communicate.
But they have brought a concept.
Yes. So I think, I'm certain, when I came here, that was also a change for me too. And so that was, in terms of, having council members talk with applicants, even council members talking with staff. There's some cities that don't allow for staff to communicate directly with council members unless they're directors. The idea being that it was a way to protect staff and council members for different reasons, I think. So that was a change too, and I'm happy to change it back. I've worked in both models where that's not the expectation. I just, having understanding of when, because again, the public forum, the reason I'm concerned there is if we hit that kind of hiccup where they're not listening to me and they want to speak with council, but they're not doing any, they can come to a public forum, but then if the response, which it should be for public forum, is staff will follow up with you, that doesn't help the situation. So trying to figure out maybe how we work through that. But we don't need to have an answer tonight. It's 10:15, and I don't know if it's something we're gonna solve tonight, but I think as far as the direction I'll provide applicants, I'll make sure I'm not doing that going forward.
Okay,
So-
and maybe let's have a follow-up conversation on it at some point. I think I need to think through some of the specifics, but I think we had a good starting conversation on it.
Mr. Mayor, can I just
Yeah.
leave you with one kind of parting thought on that? I think circling back to Councilmember Lanterman's original point on that too, is I don't know that it has to be a complete departure from what you're doing now. It's not a problem to have council involvement or listening sessions or have a council member present when an applicant is meeting with staff. What you don't want is kind of what Natalie is alluding to, where staff gives them an answer, a consistent answer.
They
and
go to
then
council
they
to try to
attempt
get
do an
around
end
it,
run
yeah.
by asking council.
Yeah.
You don't want that. You want that funneled back to staff.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if all this isn't the answer, well, you can take it, bring the
Right.
concept plan, et cetera, right? And that's what you want. So I, as you think about it, you can decide, you could completely go the other way and say, no, we're not gonna do it at all. You could do something in between. It's a dimmer, right? You could adopt your own individual approaches to it. But I think as long as everyone has the general practice of funneling back, questions about the application or proposals related to that to staff so that they can be circulated to the council as a whole, that's a best practice. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Anything else on that?
That was a good 2 minutes,
Yeah,
just like you said.
exactly. And I still have one
Oh.
more report. This one will be quick. So Highway 55 Coalition, I went to their August meeting. It's August. No, September. July. Other way around. God, I'm exhausted. My baby's sick, so it's been a long week. Anyway, went to their July meeting. They set their dues for 2025. They basically had a bunch of money when the group started about 20 years ago, and it's run out. So now they needed to formulate how they were going to collect dues going forward to keep the group growing, because they are pretty close to being able to get a project funded and done, I think, in the coming year or two. They sharpened their pencils a lot from the initial proposals. Now they have a formula that would keep us kind of in the second smallest tier, which would be $1,000 annually. So we don't have to decide that right now, but that would be for 2025. We're paid through this year.
What did we give this year?
500 or 750?
I think it's 500.
One of the two.
And that went up from 250
250.
the year before, wasn't it? Or has it always been 500?
I think it was the same for the past couple of years.
Was it?
Because I don't think they've actually officially changed their dues since that's the whole thing. They hadn't changed their dues since they got that seed money in the 80s.
But then what
early
does that
2000s, I guess.
1,000 get us?
It gives us a seat at the table, and I guess that's where the decision point needs to be made at some point, not necessarily tonight, but do we want to continue with the group? I think there's value in, it's a weird situation where we only have that little bit of 55, but it is kind of an important one to have that seat at the table in case there's any issues, to have input on it for $1,000 for, this year, next year, and maybe a third year at most until a project likely gets done. I think there's value in that, but it's certainly a conversation we can have. I just wanted to get that number out there now for budgeting purposes, so that we can have that discussion at an upcoming meeting.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And then with that, let's City council is going into closed session to consider an offer for real estate. Under the authority of Minnesota statute 13D.05 subdivision 3C3, the city is permitted to close a meeting to consider offers and counteroffers for the purchase or sale of real or personal property. The city council is going into closed session to consider an offer for real estate. The following properties are subject of the closed meeting. For the Stieg Road improvements, the properties to be discussed are PID 01-119-2332-0006, PID 01-119-2332-0001, PID 01-119-2331-0002, PID 01-119-2312-0002, PID 01-119-2342-0002, PID 01-119-2342-0001. For the Northeast Trunk Utility Project, the properties to be discussed are PID 1-119-2322-0009, PID 1-1-119-2311-0012, PID 1-1-119-2314-0006, PID 1-1-119-2314-0003. We are in closed session.
Mr. Mayor, can we just memorialize also, just because of the agenda, the city center topic has been struck as well. There will be no closed session on that.
And there will be no closed session on that third item, the city center. Thank you.
Can you unbang that gavel?
And remake. There we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Call the meeting back to order. And I will consider a motion to approve the Stieg Road easement agreements.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think we still want to offer the summary statement though.
Okay, I apologize. In the closed session, this city council just adjourned to closed session, closed pursuant to the Minnesota statute 13D.05 subdivision 3C3, in which the city council discussed offers or counteroffers for the purchase or sale of real property. Staff and the city attorney were provided direction. And then the city council is prepared to entertain motions related to the purchase. I'll consider a motion to approve the Stieg Road easement agreements.
I'll
for the
make that motion.
Previously listed properties subject to any final. We're
I
good.
think he has to finish saying it before we can make the motion.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Trying to see if there's any substance
If
in
you
that.
would, the very end there is reserving the opportunity for staff and the city attorney to make any final revisions as necessary, if there's any typos, things like that.
Okay.
They discover, so I'd ask for that.
To authorize, mayor and city administrator to execute the same, and for the city to fund the transaction of the plan of the acquisition has no relationship to the comprehensive plan.
I will make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Thank you.
We already
And
made it.
It wasn't finished.
yeah, that was finished. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I'll also consider a motion to approve the Northeast Trunk Utility Easement Agreements and the right of entry agreement for the previously listed properties, subject to any final revisions by staff and the city attorney, and authorize the mayor and administrator to execute the same for the city to fund the transactions and for the acquisition, and to find that the acquisition has no relationship to the comprehensive plan.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And with that,
I move to adjourn.
Before you adjourn, if I could, Mayor, I
reject
just have
that.
one thing that I want to bring to attention to council. Just a reminder that we do have work sessions scheduled in August. So the August 8th work session is actually our budget work session. So that's an important discussion on August 8th. And then on August 22nd, there was scheduled the Oswald Farm Business Park discussion based on previous feedback from council. So that was scheduled for August 22nd. The rest of the council schedule remains unchanged, but I just wanted to bring those to the forefront.
Thank you.
when you say was scheduled, remains scheduled.
Remains scheduled.
Perfect. Okay. And Jeremy, would you like to make that motion now?
Yes. I make that motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.